It always begins the same way. She looks at you, but not really you. She's looking through you at something else, something that isn't even real. There's a flicker in her eyes. You've seen it. It feels like hope, maybe even admiration, but deep down it's something else. Hunger, fantasy, a story already written. You think she sees you, but she doesn't. You're not being understood, you're being scanned, assessed, measured, like a casting director auditioning you for a role she's already scripted in her mind. The masterpiece she's building. It's not about you. It never was. Carl Jung warned us about this. Not in the soft, motivational way people like to package psychology these days. He wasn't trying to hype you up. He was performing surgery on the human soul, delicately, precisely exposing what we pretend not to see. He spent his life diving into what he called the unconscious, that part of our mind working in the shadows behind everything we do, say, and feel. And what he uncovered about women, it wasn't flattering, it wasn't romantic, it was raw, and for many it's still hard to hear. He discovered that women don't just fall for men, they fall for the idea of men, the image, the projection, the role, and the scariest part, most of the time they don't even realize they're doing it. You think she's choosing you, but what she's actually choosing is the version of you she created in her mind. A psychological puppet cast to perform in her private silent movie, and when you stop fitting the script, she doesn't rewrite the story, she replaces the actor. Jung had a name for this projection. He called it the animus, the inner masculine energy every woman carries inside. And when that animus is immature, undeveloped, or left unchecked, it becomes a tyrant. It turns from inner compass to inner dictator. That's the force that drives some women to chase the dangerous man and dismiss the good one, to argue when there's no reason, dominate without understanding, moralize without reflection. And no, Jung didn't sugarcoat this. He described it as spiritual possession, a state where a woman doesn't even realize she's no longer acting from her own consciousness, but from this internal masculine fantasy, a voice that isn't hers but feels like it is. And men, we fall for it because nobody ever taught us how to spot it. We mistake being desired for being understood. We confuse being chosen with being known. You hear her say, "You're different. You're not like the others." But you don't realize she's said that before, not just to other men, but to other projections, other characters who stepped onto the same psychological stage you're now standing on. And when the illusion crumbles, when the curtain falls, when you're no longer playing the part she cast you in, you're left standing there confused, betrayed, humiliated, asking yourself, what did I do wrong? But here's the truth. You didn't do anything wrong. You just stopped being her fantasy. You stopped being convincing in a role you were never meant to play. And this is the trap. This is the pattern. Most men never see it. They don't see the script. They don't even realize they've been acting. Jung warned us. There's only one way out of this illusion, this endless loop of performance and rejection. It's a path he called individuation, the lifelong, brutal, necessary process of becoming whole inside yourself. And here's the part no one wants to talk about. Most men never start that journey because you've been trained since birth to seek approval, to win validation, to chase worth through the eyes of women. You've been taught that your value comes from how wanted you are, from how much you're needed, from how many roles you can successfully play. And as long as that's your metric, you'll keep walking in circles. You'll keep stepping onto new stages wearing new masks, speaking new lines, only to be replaced again and again and again every time the audience gets bored. Here's the part they don't put in movies. The moment where the mask doesn't fit anymore. When the lines feel fake, the applause feels hollow, and the role you've been playing, it starts to choke you. That's where individuation begins. Not with fireworks, not with clarity, but with collapse. It starts when you get tired of pretending, tired of guessing what version of yourself is most lovable, tired of giving and bending and becoming until you can't even remember what you used to be like before she showed up. Jung wasn't trying to depress you when he talked about this. He was offering you a map to the place most men are too afraid to go inside. Individuation isn't glamorous. It doesn't get likes. It doesn't earn applause. It looks like solitude. It feels like confusion. And it demands you face the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime avoiding. The weak, the needy, the ashamed, the desperate. The you that you've buried under achievements, hookups, nice guy behavior, and fake strength. Individuation forces you to look that man in the eye and say, I see you. I'm not running anymore. And here's the uncomfortable truth. That's the moment you stop being her puppet. That's the moment you stop living for the role. Because for the first time, you're not performing for her. You're listening to you. See, most men don't get it. They keep waiting to be chosen like that's the prize. Like if she says yes, it means you've won. But Jung knew better. He knew what most men never figure out. You don't become a man by being chosen. You become a man by choosing yourself. Let that sink in. Because until you do that, until you say, this is who I am, not for applause, not for sex, not for validation, but just because it's the truth, you will keep handing over your soul to anyone who promises to love you. You'll keep bending to fit her preferences, her expectations, her projections. And slowly, you'll disappear. That's why Jung didn't talk about becoming better. He talked about becoming whole. There's a difference. Better is still about performance. Whole is about truth. And truth, it isn't always pretty. It's broken, it's jagged, it's brutal sometimes, but it's yours. And when you start standing in it, when you stop needing her to see you and start seeing yourself, you become dangerous. Not in a toxic alpha way, but in a real way. A way that makes you untouchable by fantasy. A man who's met his shadow can't be manipulated by someone else's. Because he sees it. He knows what projection looks like. He knows what false love feels like. And he doesn't chase it anymore. He doesn't fall for it anymore. Jung said the greatest tragedy of modern men isn't that they're rejected. It's that they're so willing, eager, even to become whatever they think will make them accepted. You call it compromise. You call it love. You call it partnership. But Jung had a word for it. Self-betrayal. Every time you water yourself down, every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you mold yourself into something safe and acceptable, you aren't winning her. You're losing you. You become a mask. You smile. You nod. You make yourself agreeable, likable, reliable. Until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize the man staring back. And women, they feel that. They may not say it out loud, but they sense it. The very things you think make you lovable, your predictability, your obedience, your availability are often the exact reasons she loses interest. Why? Because the feminine instinct Jung taught isn't drawn to comfort. It's drawn to mystery, to the unknown, to the man she can't fully pin down. The moment you offer yourself on a platter, completely known, totally available, endlessly accommodating, you don't become more lovable. You become invisible. You become forgettable, replaceable, because now you're just another man who gave her what she asked for instead of standing in what you truly are. And yet, here's the cruel paradox. Most men fear being alone more than they fear being fake. So you stay, you perform, you contort, you shrink, you hide, because the silence of solitude terrifies you more than the applause of pretense. But Jung warned, until you can stand alone, truly alone, you'll never be free. He wrote that individuation requires you to die before you die, not your body, but your ego, the false self, the version of you built to win love and avoid rejection. That version has to burn. Only then can something real emerge. Here's something no one wants to admit out loud. Individuation is lonely, terrifyingly lonely, because once you start walking this path, once you stop pretending, stop performing, stop people-pleasing, you begin to see things you can't unsee. You see the masks people wear, the games they play, the way they say, I love you, when what they really mean is I need you to be who I want. And at first, you want to tell them. You want to wake them up. You want to shout, don't you see it? This whole thing is fake. But when you do, they don't thank you. They mock you. They call you cold. They say you're arrogant, too serious, too analytical. They say you're the problem. But you're not. You're the mirror. And people hate the mirror, especially when it shows them what they've spent their whole life avoiding. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He spent decades working with patients terrified of one thing, their own shadow, the parts of them they repressed, rejected, buried, the anger they deny, the desires they judge, the insecurity they cover with pride, the fear they drown in busyness. And it's not just men. Jung warned that women too are taught to avoid the confrontation with their shadow. In many cultures, they're told they're already perfect, pure, emotional, intuitive, complete. But Jung didn't buy it. He wrote that the greatest danger for women wasn't some external enemy, it was the unconscious animus, that inner masculine force, the voice inside that speaks with false certainty, false logic, false authority. The part of her that says, I know best, even when she doesn't. If she doesn't confront and integrate that animus, it takes over. She becomes possessed by it, and then she starts projecting it onto every man she meets. Suddenly, it's your fault. You're the one who didn't show up right. You're the one who failed. You're the one who let her down. But here's the thing. You didn't lie to her. You didn't betray her. You just stopped performing. You stopped playing the part she unconsciously cast you in. And that's why she's angry. Not because you were flawed, but because you failed to live up to a fantasy you never agreed to. Here's what makes this so dangerous. Neither of you know what's happening. She doesn't realize she's projecting. You don't realize you're performing, and both of you think the other one is the problem. So you fight, you withdraw, you ghost, you cheat, you break, you hurt. And in the wreckage, you tell yourself, I'll do better next time. I'll find someone who gets me. But you won't. Not until you wake up. Not until you face the question most men never dare to ask. What if I'm the one responsible for this pattern? Because blaming women is easy. Calling them manipulative, deceptive, shallow, that's easy. But Jung would look you straight in the eye and ask, why did you choose her? Why did you let yourself be pulled in? Why did you ignore the red flags? Why did you stay when you felt the disconnect? Why did you shrink just to be accepted? Because here's the truth that stings. You are not a victim. You are a volunteer. You signed up for the role. You played the part. You knew deep down that something was off. But facing your own emptiness, your own lack of wholeness, was more terrifying than living in someone else's fantasy, and so you stayed. But this is where most men stop listening, because this is where the comfort ends. This is where the responsibility begins. Jung didn't hand out 10-step checklists to become alpha. He didn't promise confidence hacks or dating tricks. He gave you something harder, the lifelong soul-shattering task of sitting alone with yourself until the illusions start to die. Until that voice in your head, the one that says you're nothing without her, starts to quiet. And let me tell you, that voice will not go down easy. It will scream, it will beg, it will seduce you with nostalgia and fantasy. It'll say, you need her. It'll whisper, you're not complete without her. It'll lie, no man can live without love. But Jung's work, it whispers something else, something far more dangerous. It whispers that the man who can stand without her, without validation, without attention, without applause, is the man who is finally free. Free from fantasy, free from performance, free from being a prop in someone else's story. Here's something no one wants to admit out loud. Individuation is lonely, terrifyingly lonely, because once you start walking this path, once you stop pretending, stop performing, stop people-pleasing, you begin to see things you can't unsee. You see the masks people wear, the games they play, the way they say, I love you, when what they really mean is I need you to be who I want. And at first, you want to tell them. You want to wake them up. You want to shout, don't you see it? This whole thing is fake. But when you do, they don't thank you. They mock you. They call you cold. They say you're arrogant, too serious, too analytical. They say you're the problem, but you're not. You're the mirror. And people hate the mirror, especially when it shows them what they've spent their whole life avoiding. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He spent decades working with patients terrified of one thing, their own shadow. The parts of them they repressed, rejected, buried. The anger they deny. The desires they judge. The insecurity they cover with pride. The fear they drown in busyness. And it's not just men. Jung warned that women too are taught to avoid the confrontation with their shadow. In many cultures, they're told they're already perfect, pure, emotional, intuitive, complete. But Jung didn't buy it. He wrote that the greatest danger for women wasn't some external enemy, it was the unconscious animus, that inner masculine force, the voice inside that speaks with false certainty, false logic, false authority. The part of her that says, I know best, even when she doesn't. If she doesn't confront and integrate that animus, it takes over. She becomes possessed by it. And then she starts projecting it onto every man she meets. Suddenly, it's your fault. You're the one who didn't show up right. You're the one who failed. You're the one who let her down. But here's the thing. You didn't lie to her. You didn't betray her. You just stopped performing. You stopped playing the part she unconsciously cast you in. And that's why she's angry. Not because you were flawed, but because you failed to live up to a fantasy you never agreed to. Here's what makes this so dangerous. Neither of you know what's happening. She doesn't realize she's projecting. You don't realize you're performing. And both of you think the other one is the problem. So you fight, you withdraw, you ghost, you cheat, you break, you hurt. And in the wreckage, you tell yourself, I'll do better next time. I'll find someone who gets me. But you won't. Not until you wake up. Not until you face the question most men never dare to ask. What if I'm the one responsible for this pattern? Because blaming women is easy. Calling them manipulative, deceptive, shallow, that's easy. But Jung would look you straight in the eye and ask, why did you choose her? Why did you let yourself be pulled in? Why did you ignore the red flags? Why did you stay when you felt the disconnect? Why did you shrink just to be accepted? Because here's the truth that stings. You are not a victim. You are a volunteer. You signed up for the role. You played the part. You knew deep down that something was off. But facing your own emptiness, your own lack of wholeness, was more terrifying than living in someone else's fantasy. And so you stayed. But this is where most men stop listening. Because this is where the comfort ends. This is where the responsibility begins. Jung didn't hand out 10-step checklists to become alpha. He didn't promise confidence hacks or dating tricks. He gave you something harder, the lifelong soul-shattering task of sitting alone with yourself until the illusions start to die. Until that voice in your head, the one that says you're nothing without her, starts to quiet. And let me tell you, that voice will not go down easy. It will scream. It will beg. It will seduce you with nostalgia and fantasy. It'll say you need her. It'll whisper, you're not complete without her. It'll lie. No man can live without love. But Jung's work, it whispers something else, something far more dangerous. It whispers that the man who can stand without her, without validation, without attention, without applause, is the man who is finally free. Free from fantasy, free from performance, free from being a prop in someone else's story. Here's something no one wants to admit out loud. Individuation is lonely, terrifyingly lonely. Because once you start walking this path, once you stop pretending, stop performing, stop people-pleasing, you begin to see things you can't unsee. You see the masks people wear, the games they play, the way they say I love you, when what they really mean is I need you to be who I want. And at first, you want to tell them. You want to wake them up. You want to shout, don't you see it? This whole thing is fake. But when you do, they don't thank you. They mock you. They call you cold. They say you're arrogant, too serious, too analytical. They say you're the problem. But you're not. You're the mirror. And people hate the mirror, especially when it shows them what they've spent their whole life avoiding. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He spent decades working with patients terrified of one thing, their own shadow. The parts of them they repressed, rejected, buried. The anger they deny. The desires they judge. The insecurity they cover with pride. The fear they drown in busyness. And it's not just men. Jung warned that women too are taught to avoid the confrontation with their shadow. In many cultures, they're told they're already perfect, pure, emotional, intuitive, complete. But Jung didn't buy it. He wrote that the greatest danger for women wasn't some external enemy, it was the unconscious animus, that inner masculine force, the voice inside that speaks with false certainty, false logic, false authority. The part of her that says, I know best, even when she doesn't. If she doesn't confront and integrate that animus, it takes over. She becomes possessed by it. And then she starts projecting it onto every man she meets. Suddenly, it's your fault. You're the one who didn't show up right. You're the one who failed. You're the one who let her down. But here's the thing. You didn't lie to her. You didn't betray her. You just stopped performing. You stopped playing the part she unconsciously cast you in. And that's why she's angry. Not because you were flawed, but because you failed to live up to a fantasy you never agreed to. Here's what makes this so dangerous. Neither of you know what's happening. She doesn't realize she's projecting. You don't realize you're performing. And both of you think the other one is the problem. So you fight, you withdraw, you ghost, you cheat, you break, you hurt. And in the wreckage, you tell yourself, I'll do better next time. I'll find someone who gets me. But you won't. Not until you wake up. Not until you face the question most men never dare to ask. What if I'm the one responsible for this pattern? Because blaming women is easy. Calling them manipulative, deceptive, shallow, that's easy. But Jung would look you straight in the eye and ask, why did you choose her? Why did you let yourself be pulled in? Why did you ignore the red flags? Why did you stay when you felt the disconnect? Why did you shrink just to be accepted? Because here's the truth that stings. You're not a victim. You are a volunteer. You signed up for the role. You played the part. You knew deep down that something was off. But facing your own emptiness, your own lack of wholeness, was more terrifying than living in someone else's fantasy. And so you stayed. But this is where most men stop listening. Because this is where the comfort ends. This is where the responsibility begins. Jung didn't hand out 10-step checklists to become alpha. He didn't promise confidence hacks or dating tricks. He gave you something harder. The lifelong, soul-shattering task of sitting alone with yourself until the illusions start to die. Until that voice in your head, the one that says you're nothing without her, starts to quiet. And let me tell you, that voice will not go down easy. It will scream. It will beg. It will seduce you with nostalgia and fantasy. It'll say, you need her. It'll whisper, you're not complete without her. It'll lie, no man can live without love. But Jung's work, it whispers something else, something far more dangerous. It whispers that the man who can stand without her, without validation, without attention, without applause, is the man who is finally free. Free from fantasy, free from performance, free from being a prop in someone else's story. Here's the paradox most men never understand. The moment you stop trying to be what she wants, the moment you stop twisting yourself into a character in her fantasy, that's when something incredible happens. You become real. You stop being a role. You stop being a function. You stop being a fix for her unmet needs. You become a man, not the kind that postures, not the kind that boasts, but the kind that stands in his own presence so completely that others can't help but feel it. You don't have to say a word. You don't have to prove a thing. Your existence speaks louder than your performance ever could. And yes, ironically, this is when women feel the most drawn to you. Not because you need them, but because you don't. That absence of need, that's rare, that's magnetic. It's not indifference, it's groundedness. You're not pushing them away. You're not playing hard to get. You just don't need to be got. And they feel it. They feel the difference between a man who wants them and a man who needs them to feel like a man. The first is attractive, the second exhausting. Now, here's where it gets deeper. When you stop living to be chosen, you start noticing something strange. People get uncomfortable around you, not because you're mean, not because you're cold, but because your presence forces them to confront their own masks. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't flinch, doesn't beg, doesn't bend. You've stepped off the stage, and now they don't know how to act. They call you distant. They call you arrogant. They call you unavailable. But what they're really saying is this: I can't control you anymore. You've become unpredictable, untouchable, unmanipulable. And that makes people uneasy, because most people, men and women, are still living in the script, still performing, still pretending. And when you stop playing your part, you break the illusion for everyone else. Carl Jung knew this. He wrote that the individuated man, the man who's walked through his shadow and claimed his truth, he's not welcomed by society. He's feared, misunderstood, labeled. Why? Because he doesn't follow the rules of the emotional economy. He's not easy to manipulate. He's not waiting to be loved. He's not begging for inclusion. He's not playing the game. And that threatens those who still are. This is why so many women, especially those still under the influence of the fantasy, will say things like, "You're too much in your head. You're emotionally unavailable. You're cold." But what they're really saying is, I can't shape you into the version of a man I've always imagined. Because you've stopped reading from her script. You're not a character anymore. You're not reciting lines. You're not playing the savior or the villain or the romantic hero. You're just you. And for someone who's never met the real version of themselves, that's terrifying. Jung once joked that the gods have become diseases. What ancient cultures called divine possession, modern psychology calls neurosis. And let's be honest, the modern man chasing feminine validation, chasing it like a drug, like oxygen, he's not in love. He's spiritually sick. You think it's romantic when you say, "I'd do anything for her," or "she's my everything." But Jung would shake his head. He'd tell you, that's not love. That's a refusal to carry your own soul. Because if she becomes your meaning, your hope, your identity, you've handed her a weight she can't possibly carry. And eventually, she will drop it. She has to, not because she's cruel, not because she's heartless, but because no woman, no matter how loving, can hold the burden of a man who refuses to hold himself. And when she drops it, when she finally lets go, you'll feel betrayed. But that moment, as painful as it is sacred. It's the collapse of the illusion. It's the beginning of truth. And you should thank her, because in that collapse, you come face to face with the reality. The work of becoming a man was never hers to do. It was always yours. So now you stand at a fork in the road. You can go down the familiar path, blame her, hate her, call her names, join the angry mob of men online mocking women, rejecting them, swearing them off. Or you can do the hard thing. You can do what Jung would have demanded. You can turn inward. You can begin the brutal, liberating, lonely work of becoming whole. Not for applause, not for attention, not for anyone else, but for you. Because if you don't, if you keep looking for her to fix you, complete you, define you, you'll keep playing roles in other people's plays. You'll keep mistaking fantasy for connection. And every love you find will just be another lie you tell yourself to avoid the truth. You see the woman you've been chasing. She's not out there. Not really. She's a reflection, a mirror of the part of yourself you've abandoned, the part you refuse to face, the inner feminine, the anima as Jung called it. Until you meet her inside yourself, every relationship will be a performance. Every love will be a lie, told in two voices, yours and hers, each echoing unmet needs, unrealized fears, unspoken wounds. Because when you haven't met your own feminine, you project her onto the first woman who smiles at you. You fall in love not with who she is, but with what she represents. A muse, a savior, a healer, a dream. And she's not those things. She never was. She's just a person fighting her own inner war, carrying her own baggage. But to the man who hasn't faced his own soul, she looks like the missing piece. And that's the trap. You make her your meaning, so when she leaves or disappoints you, you lose more than just her. You lose yourself. That's why Jung insisted, before you chase love, chase integration. Face your shadow. Meet your anima. Reclaim the parts of yourself you've tried to outsource to women. When you do that, when you bring the masculine and feminine into union within, something strange happens. You stop chasing women. You stop performing. You stop needing. And you start attracting truth. Not because you're running game, not because you've mastered some tactic, but because you're whole. And wholeness is magnetic in a world full of fragments. So what happens when you meet her, the real woman, not the projection? You'll know immediately. She won't flood you with praise. She won't put you on a pedestal. She won't talk like she's found her other half. She won't need you to complete her because she's already done the work. She's faced her own shadow. She's met her animus. She's burned the fantasy. So when she looks at you, she's not seeing potential. She's seeing you. Not a savior, not a prince, not a puzzle piece. A partner. And she'll meet you there on solid ground. No games, no masks, no projections. Just truth. And truth feels different. There's no intensity rush, no highs followed by anxiety, no, what does this mean? Or why hasn't she texted? There's calm, there's curiosity, there's presence. Because when two whole people meet, they don't collide, they connect. And connection, real connection, requires no performance. But let's be honest. Most of you won't get there. Not because you're not smart enough, not because you're not strong enough, but because you'll quit. You'll stop halfway. You'll go back to the illusion. Because the fantasy is comforting even when it hurts. You'll tell yourself, it's not that bad. I'll try harder next time. She was just crazy. And you'll start the cycle all over again. Because facing your real self without filters, without labels, without distractions is terrifying. It means walking into the unknown. It means sitting in silence long enough to hear the voices you've been drowning with noise. It means breaking down before you break through. And most men, they don't want that. They want the result, but not the path. But if you, the man listening to this, if you have the guts to keep going, to keep walking into the fire of truth, to keep stripping away everything that's not real, you'll reach something terrifyingly beautiful. You'll reach yourself, not the version you perform, not the identity others handed you, but the man underneath it all. The man who is not waiting to be chosen. The man who no longer asks permission to exist. The man who no longer performs love, but is love, whole, present, awake. And when that happens, something else changes too. Women no longer define you. They no longer complete you. They no longer validate your masculinity. They become something else. Partners, not prizes. mirrors, not mothers, allies, not saviors. You love them not because you need them to fix you, but because you choose them from a place of abundance, from a place that knows exactly who you are and doesn't apologize for it. And when you love like that, it's not possession, it's not obsession, it's not projection, it's freedom. At this point in the journey, you realize something big. You've spent most of your life trying to be chosen by women, by friends, by society, by anyone who would say, yes, you belong. But now, you don't crave that anymore. Because when you choose yourself fully and without apology, you no longer wait for approval to be who you are. You just are. And this isn't arrogance. It's not ego. It's sovereignty. It's the quiet, unshakable knowing that your worth was never up for debate, that you were never supposed to prove anything, that being a man isn't about being accepted, it's about standing alone and still standing. Carl Jung called this the individuated man, the man who has become his own authority, the man who has faced his unconscious and refused to flinch, the man who is no longer a product of his conditioning, but a creator of his life. But let me warn you, this man, this you, he doesn't fit in anymore. He doesn't blend. He doesn't play along. He doesn't laugh at the jokes everyone else laughs at. He's not trying to win points. He's not checking if what he says is correct. He speaks from truth, not from fear. And that kind of man, he makes people nervous. You'll notice it. The way people react to your presence. Some will be drawn to it almost magnetically. They won't know why, only that you make them feel more real when they're near you. But others, they'll back away. They'll label you. They'll say things like, he's too intense. He thinks he's better than everyone. He's emotionally unavailable. But none of that is true. What's true is they're uncomfortable because you no longer give them what they're used to the illusion. You're not here to entertain. You're not here to fill a role. You're not here to be whatever they need you to be so they can feel safe. You're just here as yourself. And for those still trapped in performance and projection, that's terrifying. So here's the funny part. The people who once begged for your attention, who wanted your time, your energy, your love, they'll start to resent you for not needing theirs. Especially women who are still caught in the fantasy. They'll say you've changed, that you're distant, that you've lost your passion. But what they really mean is I don't know how to control you anymore. Because now you see the game. You see how love was used as currency, affection as leverage, validation as a leash, and you don't play anymore. You're not bitter. You're not angry. You're just free. Jung said something powerful. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Nowhere is this more true than in relationships. We call it love. We dress it up with flowers and Instagram captions. But underneath, most relationships are just two people trying to get the other person to fill the hole inside themselves. They're not partnerships. They're transactions. If you give me comfort, I'll give you love. If you give me attention, I'll give you worth. If you give me security, I'll give you sex. But real love, it has no price tag. It demands nothing. It offers everything. Because it comes from a place of overflow, not emptiness. And that's what makes the individuated man so dangerous. He doesn't need. He doesn't chase. He doesn't cling. He gives because he can. because he has enough inside himself to offer. He loves not to be completed, but to share the wholeness he already carries. And that's the kind of man women cannot control and cannot forget. But again, let's be real. Most men won't get here, not because they can't, but because they won't. They'll stop the moment it gets hard. They'll choose the performance over the pain, the applause over the solitude, the mask over the truth. They'll go back to chasing women, begging for affection, calling it romance, and they'll never know what it means to be free. But you made it this far. You've already seen behind the curtain, and now you face a choice. Will you go back to pretending, or will you keep walking, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when no one claps for you? Will you finish what you started? Will you become the man who doesn't just know the truth but lives it? Let's say you do keep going. You keep walking past the noise, past the need for validation, past the desperation to be someone else's idea of enough. What happens then? You enter a strange new world, a world where you don't wake up asking, "What does she want from me?" But instead, "What do I want from myself?" You start living on your own terms, not in rebellion, but in truth. Because once the illusion dies, there's nothing left to chase. And for the first time in your life, you're not tired anymore. You're still not stagnant, still rooted, clear, unshakable. Here's what most men don't realize. When you become this kind of man, you no longer attract women who are looking for a character. You attract women who are looking for the truth. And those women, they're different. They've done the work. They've burned their fantasies. They've stopped projecting. They're not looking to be saved. They're not looking to mold you into their missing piece. They're just looking to meet you as equals, as whole beings. And when that meeting happens, you'll feel it instantly. There's no intensity rush, no power struggle, no unspoken games. Just presence. She won't ask you to change. She won't confuse your silence with distance. She won't punish you for having boundaries, because she has her own. She's not looking for a father or a prince or a fixer. She's looking for someone who can walk beside her, not in front, not behind. Someone who doesn't complete her, but reflects the wholeness she's already found. And here's the paradox. When you meet a woman like that, the one who doesn't need you, doesn't cling to you, doesn't worship you, you'll be more drawn to her than anyone else you've ever known. Why? Because it's real. There are no projections, no scripts, no roles to perform. You're not her fantasy. You're just you. And she's not your dream girl. She's just her. And somehow, that's more than enough. But let's be clear, she's rare. Because most people, men and women alike, are still lost in the illusion, still trapped in fantasy, still looking for someone to carry their soul. They want to be completed, not reflected. And you can't help them with that. You can't save them. You can't do their inner work for them. You can't drag them through their shadows. You can't wake them up before they're ready. That's not your job. Your job is to keep walking, to keep living the truth, to keep holding the mirror, even when people throw stones at it. Because one day someone will look into that mirror and see themselves for the first time. And that moment, that's what it's all about. That's how you love now, not by fixing, not by saving, but by standing, by being the example, by being the proof, by being real in a world built on performance. Jung knew this would be the hardest part, not facing your own shadow, not standing alone, but watching the people you care about stay asleep, watching them repeat the same patterns, watching them destroy the very thing they say they want, watching them trade truth for comfort, and knowing you can't stop them. All you can do is stay in your lane, speak when called, act with integrity, and let your presence speak for itself. Because here's the truth. The individuated man doesn't chase influence. He doesn't need a platform. He doesn't care about attention. He influences by being. His life is the lesson. His walk is the message. His energy teaches more than his words ever could. And the people who are ready, they will find him. They will feel him. They will recognize something in him that they've been looking for, maybe even something they forgot they had in themselves. So, now we return to the beginning, that moment when she looks at you, not as you are, but as who she wants you to become. But now, you see it differently. You see the projection. You see the unconscious story. You see the role she's already written. And you don't step into it, not because you're cruel, not because you don't care, but because you respect her too much to lie. And you respect yourself too much to pretend that. So now what happens? You're no longer playing the role. You're no longer seduced by fantasy. You're no longer hypnotized by the idea of being someone's everything. And in that space, that silence, you start to see just how many men are still asleep. Men chasing love they don't understand. Men bending themselves into shapes they can't hold. Men confusing attention with intimacy and validation with connection. You hear them talk. She changed. She used me. She led me on. And maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But Jung would ask you a different question. Why did you allow yourself to be chosen by someone who didn't see you? Because, let's be honest, you knew. You felt it. There was a moment, maybe more than one, where your gut said, this isn't real. She doesn't see me. She's in love with the idea of me. But you stayed. Why? Because it felt good to be wanted, to be praised, to be needed, even if it was fake, even if you had to play a part just to keep the attention flowing. Jung called this self-abandonment. The moment when a man knows the truth but betrays it for the illusion. And every time you do it, you lose something. Maybe not all at once, but piece by piece. You become quieter, less certain, less yourself, until one day you wake up and you're not sure who you are anymore. You only know what she liked about you, what she wanted from you, what you gave her. But you're a blur. This is why individuation is so rare, because it demands you stop blaming, stop outsourcing responsibility, stop waiting for someone else to fix what you keep breaking. It asks you to do something radical, to sit in the aftermath of your own choices and not run, to look in the mirror and say, I volunteered for that pain. I allowed the projection. I pretended to be something I'm not because I thought it would make me lovable. And if you can do that, if you can own that you've already won, because the man who can face his own role in the pattern is the man who can finally break it. Now, let's talk about the next trap, because even after you wake up, the temptation returns. A new woman appears, different this time, softer, wiser. She says the right things. She sees you, or so it seems, and your guard starts to lower, not because you're weak, but because you're still human. You still long to be known. You still ache to be understood. You still crave that connection, the one without masks. But this time, you've changed. This time, you ask better questions. You notice patterns sooner. You listen more closely, not just to her words, but to your body, your intuition, your soul. And if you feel the old script creeping back in, you pause, you breathe, you step back, because now you know what it costs to play that role. You know how it ends, and you're not willing to sell yourself out for comfort anymore. That's growth, not perfection, not invulnerability, just awareness. The ability to choose differently, to walk away from something that looks shiny on the surface but echoes the emptiness you used to live in, to stop chasing validation even when it feels so close you could taste it, to stand in your truth even when it cost you affection, attention, even love, because nothing is worth losing yourself again. Here's what no one tells you. There's grief in awakening, not just the grief of past relationships, but the grief of who you used to be, the version of you that tried so hard, that wanted so badly to be enough. That bent, broke, molded, and begged. And even though you're glad he's gone, part of you still mourns him. Because he was trying. He just didn't know better. And now that you do, you don't hate him. You honor him. Because without that version of you, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be awake. You wouldn't be you. So what now? Now, you live differently. You speak slower. You listen deeper. You carry your truth like armor, not to hurt, but to protect. You love without losing yourself. You give without needing to be repaid. You lead without needing to be followed. And when the world tells you to perform again, to be charming, agreeable, safe, you smile. Because you remember what that cost you last time. And this time, you're not paying Dot. So, what does life look like now? You've walked through fire. You've faced your shadow. You've let go of roles, illusions, and emotional games. You're not playing to the crowd anymore. You're not chasing likes or longing for applause. You're not wondering, am I good enough for her? You're asking, is this real enough for me? You've become something rare in this world, a man without a script, and that makes you dangerous, not because you harm others, but because you no longer need anything from them. You don't walk into a room with expectations. You walk in with presence, with clarity, with groundedness. You don't perform to be loved. You offer love if and only if it comes from truth. But let's be honest, it's lonely at first. The world was designed for the mask. There's a script for every kind of man, the hero, the provider, the bad boy, the sensitive nice guy. Each one with a job to do, a role to perform, a persona to maintain. And when you walk away from all of them, you stop fitting in. You don't know what to say at the party anymore. You don't know how to flirt without pretending. You don't know how to play the game when the rules disgust you. But here's the secret. That disconnection, that awkwardness, it's a sign you're waking up. You're not jaded. You're not bitter. You're real. And real has always made people uncomfortable. You start seeing the world through different eyes. You see the projection everywhere. The girl who's still waiting for a man to fix her life. The guy who's still performing for love he doesn't respect. The relationships built on need instead of truth. And sometimes you want to shake 'em. You want to say, wake up. You don't have to live like this. But you don't, because you remember what it was like to be asleep. You remember how painful it is to have your illusions shattered before you're ready. So instead, you choose something else. You choose to become the proof. You live so truthfully, so steadily, so fully, that the people around you start asking questions they've never dared to ask before. They look at you and wonder, What does he have that I don't? Why does he seem so free? And maybe, just maybe, they start their own journey too. But let's talk about love again, because here's the twist. The moment you no longer chase it, it shows up. Not in the way you imagined, not in some dramatic, all-consuming romance, but in a quiet, grounded presence. A woman who's not looking for a fantasy, who doesn't need you to be a hero, who doesn't ask you to change, perform, or shrink. She sees you, really sees you, and doesn't flinch, because she's done her own work. She's met her shadow. She's integrated her animus. She no longer projects her unfinished story onto men. So when she chooses you, it's not because you complete her. It's because she wants to walk beside you. And that, my friend, is where the real relationship begins. No performance, no power struggle, no pedestal. Just two whole people choosing each other without illusion. It's not fireworks every night. It's not a roller coaster of highs and lows. It's solid. It's calm. It's deep. You fight, but cleanly. You talk with presence. You connect with intention. And when you look in her eyes, you don't see your savior. You see your reflection. Not because she is you, but because she no longer needs to make you something you're not. That's the power of this work. It doesn't just change your mind. It changes your life. It filters who can even come near you. It attracts truth and repels illusion, and not because you're better, but because you're clear. Clear on who you are. Clear on what you're not. Clear on the kind of love you'll no longer accept, even if it comes dressed in beauty and charm. But here's the final truth. This journey never ends. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm done, because the unconscious is endless. The shadow has layers. The ego evolves, and so must you. But now you're not afraid of the work. You're not avoiding it. You welcome it, because every step deeper into yourself is a step further out of the performance, a step further out of illusion, a step closer to freedom. Let's talk about power. Not the loud kind, not the kind that needs to dominate, impress, or intimidate. I'm talking about the quiet kind, the power of a man who can walk away not in anger, not in revenge, but in clarity, because he knows who he is. He knows what he's worth, and more importantly, he knows what he will no longer tolerate. That man, he's rare, because most men stay too long. They hold on too tightly. They beg for love that's already gone. Why? Because they are still chasing the role, still hoping to be enough, still trying to prove something to someone who never truly saw them. But the man who's done the work, he doesn't need to prove anything anymore. He knows if love requires a performance, it isn't love. If connection demands self-betrayal, it's not real. If acceptance costs you your integrity, it's a debt not worth paying. This is the man who knows when to walk, not because he's heartless, but because he finally grew a heart for himself. He knows that sometimes love means leaving, that you can love someone deeply and still choose not to stay in a story that asks you to shrink. And when he leaves, he doesn't slam doors. He doesn't send dramatic texts. He doesn't ghost. He simply closes the chapter with honesty, with grace, with finality. Because he's not addicted to closure. He is closure. He doesn't need her to understand. He doesn't need her to agree. He doesn't even need her to wish him well. Because he's not walking out for her. He's walking back to himself. Now, let's flip the mirror. Are you the kind of man who stays too long? Do you hold on because you're scared of being alone? Do you cling because her validation still means more to you than your own self-respect? It's okay to admit that. It's okay to say, I've been the man who begged. I've been the man who overgave. I've been the man who lost himself for love. But it's not okay to stay there, because every time you stay past your truth, you teach yourself that your boundaries don't matter, that your pain is acceptable, that your silence is survival. And that's how men die, not all at once, but piece by piece. Here's what Jung would want you to hear. You don't have to be angry to leave. You don't have to be perfect to walk. You just have to see clearly, to see the difference between love and control, between intimacy and enmeshment, between being chosen and being seen. Once you see that difference, you can't unsee it, and you'll never settle again. Because settling isn't about what she gives, it's about what you're willing to lose of yourself just to be near her. That's not love, that's fear, dressed up as romance. So how do you know when it's time to walk? When your truth no longer fits in the relationship, when your boundaries are seen as threats, when your silence is met with guilt trips, when your growth is punished instead of celebrated, when the cost of staying is your soul. And when that moment comes, when you know it's time to go, do it like the man you've become. Not the boy who begs, not the actor who performs, but the man who knows, who says, I love you and I choose myself, and then walks, not away from her, but toward a life built on truth. And what happens after that? It gets quiet, painfully quiet, because you're no longer distracted by chaos. You're no longer consumed by confusion. You're no longer addicted to drama disguised as passion. You're just alone. And at first that feels like death, because the noise used to keep you from hearing your own voice. The fantasy used to protect you from facing reality. The performance used to give you a place to hide. But now there's nowhere to run. It's just you, your thoughts, your wounds, your truth. And this is where most men panic. They go back, they call, they text, they reopen wounds just to feel something again. Because the silence is too loud. The stillness is too unfamiliar. But if you can stay, if you can sit in that void without trying to fill it, if you can face what you used to avoid, you'll find something no woman can ever give you. Yourself. Your full, raw, untamed self. Not the version they liked. Not the version that got you approval. Not the version you built to survive. You. And once you meet that man, you'll never trade him for fantasy again, Dot. This is the part where most people turn back. The stillness, the silence, the deep echoing void of solitude. No text messages lighting up your phone, no one calling your name, no stage to perform on, no spotlight to chase. Just you and the parts of yourself you've never had to face until now. And it feels like death, because in a way it is. It's the death of the man who lived for approval, the death of the version of you who contorted for connection, the death of the boy who kept asking, am I enough yet? That version of you doesn't make it through this part of the journey. And thank God, because he was never built to carry the weight of who you truly are. Jung wrote that individuation requires a man to die before he dies, and now you understand what he meant. This isn't physical death. This is ego death. This is emotional disintegration. This is watching every illusion you ever clung to burn. And it hurts. Not because it's wrong, but because you've been living inside lies so long, the truth feels like violence. You grieve. Not just the relationships you've lost, but the years. The years you spent performing, pleasing, pretending. You grieve the potential you buried to keep other people comfortable. You grieve the man you could have become. If only you had chosen yourself sooner. But grief isn't your enemy. It's your portal. It's what you walk through on your way to freedom. And once you pass through that grief, you start to see things clearly. You look back on your relationships, and instead of asking, "Why did she do this to me?" you start asking, "What was I refusing to see?" You start to realize how much of your pain wasn't about her. It was about you. Your blind spots, your lack of boundaries, your addiction to being needed, your fear of being alone. You weren't a victim. You were a volunteer. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. But now you're awake. And when a man wakes up, he can never go back to sleep. This is the turning point. You're no longer trying to be desirable. You're trying to be honest. You're no longer chasing love. You're chasing reality. And from this place, this grounded, humbled, clarified place, you start to rebuild. Not from need, not from pain, but from choice. You begin crafting a life that reflects you, not who you were told to be, not who women wanted you to be, but who you actually are. And that man, he walks differently. He speaks slower. He listens better. He doesn't rush. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't chase. Women feel it. The ones still trapped in fantasy. They'll accuse you of being distant, hard, emotionless. But the ones who've done the work too, they'll feel safe near you, not because you make them comfortable, but because you're real. And real is rare. You're not trying to be her dream man. You're not auditioning for the role. You're offering something better, truth. You're saying, "This is me. Take it or leave it. I'll be fine either way." And here's the wildest part. She might walk away, and you won't flinch, because you're not afraid to be alone anymore. You've met yourself in the silence. You've faced your shadow in the dark. You've bled your illusions dry. You're not looking for a savior. You're not looking for a mother. You're not looking for a mirror. You're just looking for someone who sees clearly like you do and is ready to walk together without pretending. Dot. This is the chapter where your whole life changes, not with fanfare, not with applause, but with silence. The silence that follows when you stop performing. You're no longer the man who bends to fit. You no longer ask, "What do I need to be?" So she stays. Instead, you ask, "Can I stay true even if she leaves?" And the answer, yes, because now you can. That's the difference. You don't fear loss the way you used to, because you're no longer losing yourself to keep someone else around. You've reclaimed something sacred, your center, that place inside you that doesn't shift based on someone else's approval, that core identity that doesn't need to be validated to be real. And now, your relationships look different. They move slower. They go deeper. They don't explode with intensity. They build with integrity. You're not addicted to drama anymore. You're not mistaking adrenaline for love. You know the signs now. You feel the tension when someone's not seeing you, but the idea of you. You sense when a woman's falling for the projection instead of the person. And you don't play along. You stop it gently, firmly, because you refuse to rehearse someone else's fantasy ever again. You're not a character. You're a man. You start doing that everywhere, not just in relationships in your career, in your friendships, in the way you speak, in the way you stand. You don't soften your truth to keep the peace. You don't dilute your vision to fit the room. You've grown comfortable being misunderstood because the moment you speak with clarity, you realize how many people only loved you for your silence. They liked the version of you that agreed, that smiled, that said yes to everything, even when your soul was screaming no. But now, you say no with full conviction, without guilt, without over-explaining. And the people who can't handle that, they disappear. Let them. Because the man you are becoming doesn't need to be surrounded by people who only accept the mask. Here's something Jung understood deeply. The moment you stop living for others' expectations, you threaten their control, and they'll try to pull you back. Women might try to seduce you with the fantasy again. Friends might guilt you for changing. Family might question why you're so different now. But they're not really talking about you. They're talking about the version of you that made them comfortable. That version, he's gone. And you don't owe them a resurrection. This is the point where solitude becomes strength. Not isolation, not withdrawal, but sovereignty. You're no longer accessible to people who expect you to play a role. Your time becomes sacred. Your energy becomes expensive. Your presence becomes earned, not because you're arrogant, because you finally understand your value. You know what your attention costs now, and you no longer give discounts to those who can't see you. And when love comes again, and it will, you meet it differently. You don't lead with charm, you lead with clarity. You don't try to impress, you try to connect. You show her who you are early and honestly. And if she flinches, if she tries to reshape you, reframe you, repurpose you, you walk, not in anger, not in bitterness, in peace, because, you know, the woman who's for you won't ask you to shrink. She won't need a mask. She'll be a mirror, a partner, a witness. She won't complete you because she's already complete. And that kind of woman, she doesn't want a role to play either. Together, you'll build something rare. Not a performance, not a fantasy, but a partnership. One rooted in self-awareness, truth, and mutual sovereignty. That's not love as you used to know it. That's love as Jung envisioned it. Two individuals who've met themselves first and choose to walk together not out of need, but out of freedom. Let's take a breath. You've walked a long way, not in miles, but in self. You've stripped away illusions, burned through projections, and left behind the version of you who was always performing. And now you're beginning to taste what it means to be enough. Not because someone told you, not because a woman said you're different, not because you finally got chosen, but because for the first time in your life you chose yourself. And that right there is the shift. You're not waiting to be called a man. You are one, not because of what you've achieved, how many people respect you, or who loves you, but because you face the one thing most men avoid until the day they die, your own soul. You stared down the shadow and didn't run. You confronted your desperation and didn't numb it. You sat in the silence and didn't try to fill it with noise, women, or distractions. You earned your own trust, and now you walk differently. Let's talk about that walk. You don't move like a man who's trying to prove something. You move like a man who knows he already is something. There's no rush, no panic, no pressure to perform. You're not in a hurry to be liked loved, or wanted. You speak slower, you think deeper, you act cleaner, because when you no longer live in reaction to the world, you become a force within it. You become calm in rooms full of chaos. You become grounded in conversations full of noise. You become the presence people didn't know they needed until you showed up. Here's what changes too. You no longer confuse attraction with alignment. A beautiful woman doesn't shake you. A flirty compliment doesn't pull you off course. A fantasy doesn't make you forget who you are. You've grown out of the need to chase chemistry at the expense of your clarity. You don't ask, "Can I get her?" You ask, "Should I even want her?" Because now, you know, the most dangerous thing a man can do is confuse his loneliness with his standards. You don't settle for connection that costs your peace anymore. You'd rather be alone in truth than held in illusion. That's power. But it's also responsibility, because now you see clearly. You can't pretend you don't. You can't go back to playing dumb just to feel wanted. You can't shrink just to be accepted. You can't feign ignorance about the games people play with love and desire. You're accountable to your vision now. And that means walking away more often. It means saying no without guilt. It means letting go of the almosts, the not quites, and the she has potential stories. Because now you don't build relationships on hope. You build them on reality. And reality isn't always sexy. It's not always fun. It doesn't always post well on Instagram. But it lasts, and it holds, and it heals. Because when two real people meet, not actors, not performers, not projections, the love they create becomes something sacred, not because it's perfect, but because it's true. There are no roles to play. There are no lines to remember. There's just presence. And in that presence, something deeper than romance is born. Respect. Respect changes everything. Because now you know what it feels like to respect yourself. You won't accept love that comes with disrespect ever again. You'll see it immediately. The subtle digs, the veiled control, the invisible strings. And instead of tolerating it, managing it, trying to explain it away, you'll walk. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much to pretend anymore. That's the new you. Not harder, not colder, just clearer. And when you finally meet the woman who's also done this work, it won't feel like fire. It'll feel like peace. She won't try to own you, change you, or complete you. She'll sit across from you and simply say, "I see you." And you'll believe her, because now, finally, you see yourself, Dot. Now you're living in a different kind of reality. Not the one where everything is based on appearance, on how well you perform, on how deeply you're desired. That world, the one built on illusion, you've stepped out of it. You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed, and you've become something you never expected a mirror. Not the kind that flatters, not the kind that distorts, the kind that reflects truth, raw, quiet, unfiltered. And that's why people start to react to you differently. Because when you become a mirror, you no longer feed the fantasy. You don't give false hope. You don't pretend to be what they want. You don't dance for their validation. And that makes people uncomfortable. Some will admire you. Some will resent you. Some will try to change you. But none of them will forget you. Because you're not just a man. Now you're a reminder of what's possible when someone stops lying to themselves. A reminder of what it looks like when a man chooses truth over performance. A reminder that authenticity is not a posture, It's a presence. You don't have to speak louder to be heard. Your silence does the speaking. You don't need to prove you're grounded. Your energy settles the space. You don't have to convince anyone that you're whole. They feel it even if they don't understand why. And here's the paradox. The very thing that once made you invisible, your truth, your depth, your integrity, now becomes the thing that draws the right people toward you. You're no longer looking for quantity. You're open to quality. Fewer conversations, deeper connections. Fewer, what are we talks? More, here's who I am, clarity. You've stopped looking for people who accept your mask. You're now attracting the few who can meet your soul. But let's not romanticize it. Being a mirror is not always easy, because once you see truth, you can't unsee it. You walk into a room and feel the masks people wear. You hear someone speak and sense the pain they're hiding. You date someone new and immediately recognize their patterns, their projections, their wounds, and the old version of you. He would have tried to save them. He would have overextended, overexplained, overfunctioned. But the man you are now, he knows better. He knows that healing isn't something you do for people. It's something they have to do with themselves. And love isn't rescuing, it's reflecting. So when a woman projects onto you again when she begins to fall for who she hopes you are instead of who you truly are, you catch it early. And instead of playing along, you stop the performance before it begins. You say, I'm not who you imagine me to be. I won't pretend to be. And if that makes you walk away, I'll still be here standing as myself. And in that moment, you set both of you free. You protect her from the pain of disappointment, and you protect yourself from the pain of self-betrayal, because you've done that before, and you'll never do it again. This is what Jung meant when he said, individuation leads to wholeness. It's not about becoming someone better. It's about becoming someone real. It's about being so deeply rooted in yourself that no woman, no compliment, no attention can pull you away from your center. And when you live from that place, you become immovable, not stubborn, not closed, anchored. People will test it. They'll try to pull you back into the performance. They'll say, you've changed, when what they really mean is you're no longer willing to abandon yourself for me. And you'll smile because they're right. You have changed. You've outgrown their story. You've exited the fantasy. You've stepped into your life, the real one, and you're not going back. So now the question becomes, what kind of woman can meet you here? Not just meet you physically, not just match your ambition, but match your depth. She's out there, but she's not waiting in the places where people gather to escape themselves. She's not seduced by shallow attention. She doesn't chase safety through performance. She's been through her own fire. And when she meets you, she'll know, because she's been walking the same path, Dot. So here you are, not at the end, because this work never ends, but at the threshold of something new. You've let go of illusion. You've dropped the mask. You've stopped performing. And in the silence that followed, you found something most men never do. Yourself. Not the man they wanted you to be, not the man you thought you had to become, but the man who simply is. You've stared into the abyss of your own soul and refused to run. You've met your fears, your shame, your weakness, and instead of hiding them, you brought them home. You integrated. You became whole. And now you're faced with the one question that will shape every relationship, every decision, every step from here on out. Will I betray myself again? or not. Because that's what it always comes down to. Not whether she's the right woman. Not whether the world finally sees your value. Not whether you're understood. But whether you're willing to trade your truth for comfort, for attention, for approval. You used to say yes. You used to give pieces of yourself away for a smile, a kiss, a "you're enough." But now you don't play that game. Because you finally know your truth is not up for negotiation. And when you walk this way, when you live this way, everything changes. The women who once pulled you into fantasy, they fall away. The voices that once ruled your mind, they go quiet. The chaos that used to define your relationships, it can't reach you anymore because you're not reacting. You're choosing. Choosing who gets access to you. Choosing where your energy flows. Choosing how you show up without apology. You become something rare. A man who doesn't need to be chosen because he already chose himself. A man who doesn't chase the feminine because he's integrated his own. A man who doesn't perform love because he is love grounded whole alive. That's the man Jung pointed to, not the alpha, not the nice guy, not the seducer, but the individuated man, the man who has faced himself so deeply, so relentlessly, that no projection hers or his can hold him captive again. He's not waiting for someone to come complete him. He's not hoping to be picked. He's not chasing a dream. He's building something, quietly, patiently, deliberately. And when the right woman enters that space, she doesn't interrupt it. She amplifies it. Because she's not trying to own you, change you, or carry your soul. She's done her work too. You'll know it when she shows up. There won't be fireworks, no obsession, no adrenaline rush. Just presence, peace, clarity. She won't need you. She'll choose you. Not because you fill her empty spaces, but because you both recognize each other, not from fantasy, but from freedom. She'll stand there holding herself and say with her eyes, "I've met me, and now I see you." And you'll believe her because you've met you too. This is the life you've built, not because you read a book, not because you followed a script, but because you walked the hard road, the lonely road, the road few men ever finish. And now you're one of the few. One of the men who no longer needs to be seen to know he's real. One of the men who no longer performs to feel worthy. One of the men who no longer needs the world to choose him because he finally chose himself. That's not just a new chapter. That's a new life. So carry it with you. Speak it, live it. Show other men what's possible when they stop chasing and start becoming. Because truth isn't just what sets you free. It's who you were all along. Thank you for walking this journey. If you ever forget, just come back to this moment, this silence, this stillness, this man you've become. He's not perfect, but he's real, and that's more than enough.